see familiar faces. If my face doesn't look so familiar, I've got a bit of Bell's palsy. So I've got a bit of thing, and it's from sleeping in the open next to hot kilns on cold nights. They say from drinking too much Bell's whiskey, but anyway, here we are at the beginning. Why Anglo Oriental? And why the title of this exhibition, Connecting Past with Present. Anglo Oriental starts with this amazing meeting of two minds, Bernard Leach in the west and Saji Hamada in the east. Now, they sort of did this. This talk, by the way, I'm not an art historian, so the dates are going to be approximate. And we're just going to weave our way through here, and swim our way through this. So, Hamada and Leach is born in Hong Kong, so he's born in the east. He's an etcher, he goes to Slade College of Education and an arts degree in London. He becomes an etcher, he's a printer. He goes to Japan and he has an exhibition of prints. Hamada sees this. These men connect. Leach then is vitally interested in pots and the revival of the craft in his own country. So at that stage, the last of the studio potters had all but disappeared. You had William State Murray, and his picture is the little pottery in amongst these huge factories belching smoke down in Stoke-on-Trent. The sea of badly made, badly designed ceramics was upon them. That tradition was well established already. So studio potters are all but dead in Britain and Japan. Japan had closed doors for so long. So these men decide to go back to England. Hamada goes to England with Leach, joins Leach in the St. Ives pottery. He specifically established St. Ives pottery there because it's an arts community. It's very clearly an arts community. The fuel and the clay were miles away. And I wondered about that when I visited St. Ives 2 years ago. Why did he do this? He did it to elevate studio pottery into fine art. That was his goal. So he writes in his book, the first manual that we've got as potters. There are potters here today. There are a lot of potters, actually. It was the potter's book. And in it, he specifically gives the recipes and he teaches us how to do it. His first apprentice, and here we are, is Michael Cardy. And that's an African pot. Now, as Ronnie Watu opened this exhibition, remarks. This was probably fired in Abuja, I'm not sure. But Cardew is Leach's first apprentice. Leach says Cardew is the finest slipware potter in England that England has ever had. He extols his virtues. Cardew goes to England, goes to West Africa. Where's Abuja? West Africa, West Coast. Abuja. He starts a factory. He wants to teach everybody how to make pots. He runs into big problems because in Africa we don't do stuff like British do. We don't do this chaka stuff. We do things tomorrow. So he runs into trouble, but he's met there by Rabinovitz. Rabinovitz meets him there. And I think that's probably the decision. Rabinovitz had to fight a world war. He was in the Air Force up north in Africa. He was an adventurer. I think he was exporting wild birds and stuff at that stage. So he comes down and he goes to Leach in St. Ives. And Leach says to him, sorry, you're too old to be a potter. Old Toffee knows Leach, look, no, I'm sorry, you can't be a potter. Anyway, so he goes to Cardew. Cardew had a degree from Oxford. He'd come down from Oxford to make pots. This man had a career ahead of him. But these were people who wanted to elevate this craft then and turn it into what we see today. So Rabinovitz goes to work with Michael Cardew, Wentford Bridge, and there he learns the craft. Heim then comes back here, and we start the crafts movement in this country. The British potters visit here. They help establish Kolonyama and other potteries in our states and around the country, that influence comes in, and we go there. So I'll be dropping names as well, and we'll pick the names up as we go through the other exhibition. So Hein was my mentor. I see these two guys, that's Sias Bosch and Hein Rabinowitz, 1975. I walk up the path, I'm in a workshop situation. And what I was stunned at was the way that these men related to each other. Not even what they were doing. They were making large vessels like this by piling clay up, working in porcelain. I know Isias said that he remarked that throwing porcelain was like throwing with millipap. You know, he was a rechter Boere Afrikaner, so as I am. So he said it's like millipap. You've got one shot to get it up, and that's it. So these men were just interacting remarkably well. Isias was impatient because when I saw this stuff happening, I said, this is the medium through which I can express myself as an artist. And he said, "Ach man, if you want to be a painter, then you must go and buy Winsor & Newton paints. Don't even try doing it on ceramics. It's just too technically daunting," says Isias. But Hein very gently, very surely mentors a bunch of us, and we didn't even know it was happening. We'd go up there. I didn't want to disturb him, so I leave him a few porcupine quills, and we look at the pots. And we go home and we try. This museum, in its wisdom, has been collecting these people's pots, and in a way securing the future of the ceramics of South Africa, because these are the parental pots. These are the base of the whole ceramics movement, which Ronnie called the postmodernist movement. There is some antipathy between the movement, the postmodernist movement, which we all voted for our Potters Association to become the Ceramics SA, and it did that. And with our blessing it went. But there was some kind of tensions between the two organizations, but that be that as it may, I had the most wonderful compliment paid by Clementina van der Walt, who's a postmodernist potter, and she's probably our own Clarice Cliff of this country. And she said, "Anton, the pots are so grounded." She said, at the potter's market, looking at my pots, and that's the essence of these pots that you see are totally and thoroughly grounded. This man, I call him Nick, his son, I called him Saint Rabinowitz, because I never heard him say anything bad about anybody else. So one can see it in the pots are honest. He also said, "I'm not a painter." But here are some of the very best examples of his work here. This is his triple dip period. And I've tried for 20 years to try and emulate that, and I can't get the break that he gets. That's an iron break. He very gently would sort of guide us and make jokes around it, because we'd say, "Hein, can't we put some rutile in there to get those breaks?" You see, so we did it. He said, yes, he said, "It's a good, rutile's good. Yes, we had a packet in 1945, but he lost it somewhere." And then he would smile and kind of read. Or if you came to him with a copper red pot, you know, it was brilliant copper red. He said, very nice, as his high-pitched voice. "Very nice, Anton. A little bit of copper goes a long way, doesn't it?" So it was like the grounded pots. So it's almost like coming home when you see these pots. They're beautifully powerful and quietly understated. And you see the connection between these pots is reduction fire. It's where the kiln is starved of oxygen and the glaze is transmute. There's an alchemical thing happening here. Hein was a very intuitive, highly intuitive man and worked by intuition. Okay, so yeah, these pots are unique. The porcelain pots here, this man was the only man to fire up to 1400 Celsius. All of us, he went where angels fear to tread. Just to give you a rundown, those who don't do pottery, you get red heat. Cherry red would be around about 950. Orange red would be 1000. 1100 would be orange white. 1300 would be white hot, incandescent white, looking into a light glow. 1400 is almost inconceivable because it's blue white. It's the color of the atmosphere of the earth. So it's the most remarkable thing. And in there, everything became soft. So if this was a kiln and that pot was at top temperature, we could take a metal rod and bend the pot. They would all be soft. So they would have to have a specific architecture. So you can see that's the classic form of the Chinese pottery. But essentially it was the only pottery actually went to where the classic Chinese went, which is around 1400. Nothing much happens there. All the pigments are evaporating rapidly. And when we are accosted by a postmodernist and say, you guys are so conservative, why don't you just all let it hang out? My response to that is, you know what? People who jump out of aeroplanes, they're pretty conservative. They always pack a parachute in the same way every time. Because this is a technically daunting area. So there's only a certain shape that will stand up. You're talking, that's what I refer to as architecture. Ronnie found inside of that pot, we won't handle the pots, that's fine. But there's a leech bird, and the typical Asias Bosch bird was borrowed from leech. We borrow from each other, but by tradition we're given things. Haim got that wonderful Tenmoku glaze, which is the dark glaze. Every potter's got a version of that. And I'd say, Haim, that's a lovely glaze. Can you, would you like a recipe, Anton? And he'd give you the 1940 version of his glaze so that you could work your own glaze out along the way. Tenmoku means the eye of heaven. I phoned, cheekily I phoned a Japanese consulate in Cape Town when I wanted to know what it meant. And you're never far from the Zen lesson, because a Japanese man picks up the phone and I say to him, hello, can somebody over there tell me what Tenmoku means? He says, there's a silence, which is usual. And he says, yes, I am a ceramic expert. And so I said, wow, hit the jackpot here. He said, Tenmoku means the eye of heaven. And I said, but why? And then, minute silence. This, if the potter works honestly with this glaze, then the eye of heaven will open and look at you. Now, sometimes what happens technically is you get a little bit of titanium floating through a kiln. It will lodge in that dark glaze, and you will have the most beautiful crystal just growing. And potters, we apply that glaze waiting for that moment, the eye of heaven. Here we have Tim Morris. Now, Tim Morris is one of our first generation potters. He's born in the UK. He studies art. He's a painter. And surely you can see the painterly skills. I mean, the delicate approach to those birds. Tim's a very interesting man, and he probably today would be diagnosed as bipolar. So Tim had these incredible mood swings. He'd take a whole roll of paintings and say, I don't want to be a painter anymore. Nobody appreciates the work. To a second-hand shop, 30 rolled up beautiful watercolors of Transvaal thunderstorms and stuff like that. But a master potter. Other people worked with him, and here you see connections. Chris Green worked with him. And Chris Green is missing from this exhibition because he decided not to be a potter anymore, but still has a love of this work. Works with Tim. Tim dies tragically in 1989, I think, somewhere. And two men, Digby Hoods, which we'll catch up with in the other place. Digby Hoods, Chris Green, go to his studio, close the doors, and finish his backlog of pots. So the potter always has a cycle going. So you they got his bisque pots, dipped them in glaze, and they knew his brushwork intimately. So they brushed the pots. They got Tim's Japanese brushes out and put the brushwork on the pots. So, and fired them all, so that the widow of Tim had actually something to work from. But here he is, the innovative man. These pots are typical. That for me is the peak of this collection. Is that one. He painted many pictures like that. He tried to get to where Isias came in terms of porcelain, but never got to that top temperature. It was just too daunting. So now another name. Here's Brian. This is big Brian name. And you can see here the trend. I mean, this was pointed out as Brian's best piece, and I kind of agree with Ronnie Watt. That is a bit, but this is an African. And he works. Brian works with Ray Finch in the UK. He throws in his pottery for quite a few years. Comes back here. None of these guys were exceptionally good teachers. They were. Isias had this impatient, driven force. Morris was a little cynical, and Brian couldn't tolerate beginners. Haim tried also to teach at one stage, and he said, Anton, I can't understand why people don't want to make a decent pot. They actually just want to socialize. So I said, okay, that's the way it goes. Brian, I said to you, did you teach, Brian? Yes, he taught, he said. I said, did you? Yes, he stopped suddenly, he says to me. He says, one day he looked at the class that had been there for a whole morning, and on the board of pots, he said he looked hard on the board of pots, and with his astonishment, he couldn't find one pot that had any merit whatsoever. So he said he lifted the end of the board and lifted it high and high until they all slipped into the clay bucket. He said there was this deathly silence in the pottery studio. He said then somebody started dabbing their eyes in the corner. The others grabbed their handbags and they all ran off. And that was the end of Brian's teaching career. This man had a stroke about 10 years ago. I'd like to believe he's still throwing. He throws with one hand. Has he stopped throwing? But for years he threw with one hand. He was able to do that. This area, the technically daunting that Isias Bosch speaks of, is definitely not for sissies. But if you had another cabinet, you could have Barbara Robinson. And we have amongst us, we have Andrew Walker. Andrew's probably been potting longer than these guys, because Andrew flunked school and went to throw pots with Samuel Lieberman when he was 16. Started when he's 16, he's now very robust, 70 odd. And he's got another 20 years again. Potters don't die easily because they're always looking to see what comes out of the hill. Behind you are the tea bowls. Now, that's really the most fabulous collection of tea bowls, beautifully displayed. As is the wisdom of this institution to actually hold this exhibition. This is the first time these pots have been collected and exhibited together. It's a marvelous opportunity for collectors. So if you haven't started your tea bowl collection, start now. This is the place. Phil Rogers recently exhibited on his recent Gold Marks exhibition 10 by 10, 100 tea bowls that he was expecting to sell on. He sold the whole lot as an artistic unit, one unit. This is almost what I would love to have that whole lot. Just something about the tea bowl. There's some really nice ones still available, and I'm going to be talking about those potters. I had an experience. I'll pick my own one. I had an experience with a tea bowl. A friend of mine, Tia Kraft, had a Japanese friend who was terminally ill, had been terminally ill for 20 years. The doctors didn't know how she survived, but she was this highly intuitive person, and she did this with the pot and closed her eyes. This was told to me afterwards. She didn't know me at all. And she was able to give an account of where I was, what I was feeling, what I looked like, and my aspirations. It was thoroughly remarkable that this person got this information somehow out of this vessel. Lyle Watson says in his book Supernature, he has been debunked, but he says all we need is a special device, and we can play these back, and you will hear all the sounds that were surrounded the pots when they were made. You'll have the thoughts of the potter and the feelings of the potter. These are pots from the heart. None of these were wealthy men, except maybe for Digby Hoods. But we do it for the love of the stuff. So this is soul food. All these men, when we're together, it's like the fire has taught us something. So somehow you can't sit next to a kiln for 30 years firing pots and not be changed internally. So my experience is a warm, very generous people. Okay, so let's go to the other side, and then I'll open it up.